This is episode 24 of the Sacred Family Podcast, Gabriel, Part 2.
Welcome. This is Bryce Bartel with the Sacred Family Podcast. This is part 2 of the podcast about Gabriel, or as we would know from the Bible, Noah. He is one of the archangels. He's one of the four corners of one of the four angels that help preside over this creation. We finished part 1, or got to part 1. Let me do a quick recap, and then I would love to have Edwin reintroduce himself for 30 seconds or so we remember who he is, and then continue on with the second podcast. The first podcast, we laid the foundation of why a flood was needed. We talked about, first of all, a couple things. One is taking glory to yourself. That's not a good thing. And that always leads to bad things. It never leads to good things. And the thing is that taking glory to yourself typically lasts 1 or 2 generations, and then it corrupts. It's ultimately corrupting. And that's what the issue is with taking glory to yourself. I love a side note on that. We'll talk about this in another podcast, but a Tower of Babel is really, if you're going to look at the resume of a Tower of Babel, taking glory to yourself is kind of the prerequisite of a Tower of Babel. It's something that's just going to get destroyed. It's not going to last. It's going to get destroyed. And that's a big issue. The other thing is, we talked about Noah and his ark. We talked about the reason for the flood. The reason for the flood was the whole earth was cursed. And we talked about cursed lands and how you can get cursed lands, specifically related to violence, usually. But there's other ways that occurs, but violence is one of them. Now we're at the Ark of God. So what I'd like to do is continue this, but Edwin, do you mind giving a 30-second intro for yourself?
For sure. My name, my name is Edwin Wild. I am the father of 8 children. My wife, Holly, and I, we live in northern Utah in Morgan County. On a sheep and cattle ranch. The ranch itself has been in my family for 6 generations. And so we've, the first 14 years of our married life, we actually spent it in the automotive industry. And in the last, it's been about 7 years now, we've been able to return back to the town that I grew up in. It's a little town called Croydon, and happenstance kind of changed to where it allowed me to come back to the ranch. So we raise our 8 children here, and that's who I am in a nutshell.
Awesome. One of the things I love about Edwin is he's a good, hardworking, salt of the earth, humble guy, and has great insights. So we'll continue. We'll start with this podcast, the second part of this Noah or Gabriel podcast, and we're going to just do an hour and finish. So I have a couple scriptures. The first thing you can see on my screen, or you should be able to see on my screen, there's Noah or Gabriel at the ark. We talked about the need for the ark. The whole earth was cursed. But let's go into some scriptures. So I'm going to pull up a scripture. Genesis chapter 5, verse 12. Edwin, do you mind reading that?
It's not showing on my screen. Did you?
Yep. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. And is the
Here, I'll highlight the section too.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I didn't know if you want. Do you want me to read the whole thing or okay?
Yeah.
But the earth was corrupt before God, and it was filled with violence. And God looked upon it, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence. And behold, I will destroy all flesh from off the earth. Make yourself therefore an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shall you make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. And the length of the ark you shall make 300 cubits, the breadth of 50 cubits, and the height of 30 cubits. A window shall you make to the ark, and in the cubit shall you finish it above, and the door of the ark shall you set in the side thereof. Lower, second, and third chambers shall you make in it. Behold, I, even I, will bring in a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein shall be the breath of life from under heaven.
Okay. So, what are some of the things that you get from that, Edwin?
Well, I mean, clearly, kind of like what you were indicating, the earth, it's interesting that the connection the Lord makes is that the earth was corrupt before God. And why was it corrupt before God? Well, because it's filled with violence. So there's a clear connection between the land being contaminated by the violence that is connected with what men are doing. And so that's the first initial thing that kind of jumps off, and that it can become so great that the covenant that God had at first, it seems like, established with Adam, brings an end. That the Lord's no longer willing to maintain the protection of the covenant to the children of men, because it's all those unto who the breath of life comes into.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. You get to a point, Edwin, where something is so far gone, it's not salvageable anymore. If you have a house and within the walls of that house, you have, your wood framing. A couple years ago, I accidentally didn't turn off completely the hose. It was still, how you turn the thing on the side of your house and then it gets to a point and maybe you need to turn it a little bit more to officially turn it off. I got maybe 3/4 there and didn't get all the way there. And it dripped all winter and into the spring. And what happened is that where the water was, it started growing mold, and I found it out in the spring, and I had to tear out a wall. I had to clean it all up, and then I had to patch it all up, but it ended up being fine. But there's a point if you get too much black mold, or if you get termites in your wood and there's just too many termites, that sometimes you just have to gut the whole house. Like there is a tipping point where the thing is unsalvageable. You'd have to take the whole house down and start over. And that's the big problem, is the earth itself was unsalvageable. It got to a point where there had to be a flood, because every generation beyond Noah would have only made it worse, and it would cause the whole creation to forfeit what it was designed to do. So they had to clean it up. So he told Noah to go build an ark. Now, do you mind reading this next part, Edwin? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, no, it's just curious to me that it's violence that seems to be the connector of the very thing that you're describing. You know, that idea that things can become so bad that a whole new not just renovation, but a new creation has to be attempted. That's interesting to me that we as mankind arrived there at a minimum through violence. There seems to be subtext that's in that story, latent in that story, that's we're not given the full background on, but we're just given the idea that the whole earth is filled with violence, and that's interesting to me.
Well,
But yeah,
I think
I'll go
that
ahead.
no, I think that you've hit on something that's very fascinating. Um, if you go to Las Vegas and you go down to the Las Vegas Strip, you're going to see a lot of corrosive things. You're going to see strip clubs, you're going to see gambling, you're going to see a whole bunch of evil. But what you just identified, which is true, um, it wasn't that type of evil that corrupted the whole creation. On the other hand, if you get into World War II and you get into Auschwitz in World War II, that is by far worse than the Las Vegas Strip. It just is. It is evil to an nth degree that requires complete destruction. So it is fascinating that evil is graded if you think about it. There's a gradients of evil that the evil that you find in World War II or in Mao's China or in Pol Pot's Cambodia or in Uganda in the 90s, that level of evil justifies a clearing of creation. This has gone too far, you guys. We can't handle this anymore. This level of evil is so bad. You need to wipe the earth. You need to get rid of. You need to start over.
And it's interesting there because that idea that you find throughout Scripture of the blood crying from the ground to the Father. And so the Father, when he references this, or the Lord, when he references this, always references it as an imbalance that must be rectified. And so you see that, like you said, that there is demoralizing sin, but an Abraham, any number of examples that you can pull can still come from that ground. But what you can't come from is a ground of basically committed violence. That
Yeah,
when the people have fully committed themselves to endless warfare, you can't pull from that any longer.
you can't. You can't. And what it does is it compounds. It's like compounding interest. War creates an environment that so much more justification is made. They said that they were using. There was a story about this Ukrainian war with Russia that they were using rape to justify or to get people to submit. And they do that. That's when the Russians entered Berlin before the Americans and the British and the French. That's exactly what they did in Berlin. And the level, it's almost every major world war has some level of killing in mass, some sort of Holocaust. So World War II had the Jewish Holocaust. World War I had the Holocaust of the Turks killing oh god, I forget what the I forget which people. Somebody's going to listen to this podcast and get mad at me. But there were 1 million Armenians. God, I can't believe it. 1 million Armenians were killed by the Turks. In Mao's revolution, you have 2 million Tibetans. In Pol Pot's revolution, you have millions of educated people. Anytime that there is a major world war, there is some level of issue. And what happens is somebody wants to blame their problems on somebody else. And they blame, and then they justify violence, and then they make that person into some sort of image or not human, and allows them to justify them. So it's pretty intense, and that's why this level of evil is so bad, and it justifies clearing of everything.
Okay. One that had just also recently come to my knowledge that I didn't know about was they call it Holodomor, and it was the killing of over 1 million kulaks there in Ukraine. And so it's interesting that Ukraine seems to be a central point, when in not just the country, but that area. When you talk about Armenians and Turkey and whatnot, that seems to be a central area of target.
And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hotel Rwanda,
Yes.
but that's really, I mean, it's the most fascinating things. The European colonists come to Africa, and they go and they identify who's in what tribe, and why each tribe has a different thing. And it's like Rwandan may be have a bigger nose than another Rwandan, but over a couple of generations, this tribalism and this separation between the people created a issue that ultimately destroyed everybody. Like they just mass murdered everybody overnight, and that level of evil requires a clearing of the land. It requires, guys, we got to start over. This is too much. This is crazy.
Well, so the interesting, and I want to bring this full circle around to our day, because I believe that it's a pattern that's used, and so when you look at Holodomor, a lot of more was the accusation, exactly like what you were just talking about, that the farmers in Ukraine who were producing the food for Russia, that they were the enemy class because they were rich and wealthy. Well, the interesting thing is the very name for them meant peasant, and that they were accused of being. So they were basically just middle class people that had just recently, within the last generation, had risen from serfdom up into peasant class. And because of that, there was so much anger and aggression that was directed at them, that people felt it completely justified to go in, starve them, kill them, rape their women, all of the things that you were pointing at earlier, that then lead to genocide, sending them into concentration camps. And it's interesting because I find that same kind of motif rearing its head in our day. And it's this idea that it's like, the farmers are the ones, the ranchers are the ones that are, killing our planet. They are, basically making when COVID first hit, and there was a backup of distribution lines. There were, I was privy to potato farmers that were not able to get their potatoes to market. And so they were forced, because they had aged, to basically plow them under. And there was so much anger about these potato farmers in the middle of Idaho having to plow their potatoes under. And yet no one understood why. And so it was like, quite a few people that I'm connected with, were thought that they were just doing this only because of greed. And so it's always this idea that it's like, well, we can hate them, we can villainize them, because ultimately it's because they don't understand the process of distribution that requires to get people access to food in grocery stores.
Yeah.
So I think that's circumspect for our day to consider.
Well, and what's fascinating is that it's kind of like a termites in a wall or a drop of water dropping on a rock. It can be there for a while, but the way that it can come very quick.
Yep.
You can see it. You can see it far into the distance and say, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have no idea how quickly it will actually come. For instance, in 2020, the riots were overnight, and it came from somebody filming a video of a police officer handling a situation very poorly. But then it created riots all over the United States and even in various parts of the world. And it came so quickly. What the issue is that these things come very quickly. And the good example of that is Hotel Rwanda. Hotel Rwanda came overnight. Like there had been conflict and there had been dissidents and there had been issues, but in Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda literally happened overnight. And it was just like, whoa, how did this happen? But then you're like, how do you get 6 million Jews on trains, carted off to concentration camps, and slaughtered? I mean, it happens so quickly, and people make mistakes very fast, and it's quite fascinating. But it's something that occurs, and it just is.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so let's go to the next thing. I'm going to go. So the concept right here is the earth needed to be removed. The Lord needed Noah to build an ark. So what happened is that's exactly what he did. Let's go right here. Let's read this part. Let's read to right here. Do you mind reading that? 15 highlighted.
And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark, they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in.
Okay, so what do you see here, Edwin?
So there's something jumped out to me here that I've never considered before. If ever there was a time for the Lord to command a people to practice polygamy to raise up seed, it surely would have been after the flood. And yet, each man has one wife. There's 4 men, there's 4 women. They're commanded to go in, and that's the example that we get of the Lord basically repopulating his creation. So that's the first thought that I had.
What do you think? Um, is this possible? Like, can God save creation with just a family?
Clearly, yeah,
Clearly,
clearly.
yeah.
I don't think there's any argument that for God it's not the number, because the number, I mean, obviously through multiplication, the number can become exponentially sufficiently large. So it's the level of righteousness, of understanding, knowledge and wisdom combined to make understanding that then multiplies throughout generations into the future, providing that that understanding is kept.
So I have a thought for you that may pivot a thinking on Noah and the ark a little bit. So you know how the Lord always calls the church his bride, that we're the bride and he's the church? I want to consider two things. One is Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They also have creeping things of the earth and fowls of the air. Are you familiar with the Chinese New Year?
No.
Okay, so every year there's a new animal. So the year of the ox, the year of the cat, the year of the cow, the year of the rooster, the year of the, and it identifies somebody. We know that the Lord uses animal imagery quite frequently. He talks about David wrestling a lion. And he talks about Melchizedek or Shem wrestling a lion. I'm not persuaded that that was an actual lion. I mean, it absolutely could be. But when it talks about Hezekiah bringing down the high places, I kind of get the same imagery. One of the things that I wanted to highlight on here, and I'm not going to say this is scripture, this is doctrine, but I want to consider something, because there's two main images. Actually, there's three main images in Noah and the ark. That perhaps when you have a father like Noah, and you have a father like Shem, and you have a father like Ham, and you have a father like Japheth, that the animals that they're bringing on the ark, or maybe I should say some of the animals, may actually be people. And it could represent their church. A church could have a cow. A church could have a lamb. Those two things are images that we get. Ammon, the son of Mosiah, protected the lambs. There's some really good images there. Joseph of Egypt had cows bow to him. That's also very good imagery. But when you have animals, you may be a falcon. Another person may be an eagle. Somebody may be a cow. Another person may be a deer or a hen gathering their chickens under their wings. Things like that. I'm not saying that there weren't animals on the boat or the ark, but I am suggesting that maybe there were also some churches there too, maybe one for each of the sons of Noah.
That's really interesting to consider. I'd never thought about that before. Working with animals most of my life, both in the wild and then also domesticated animals. It's been interesting because I routinely find the attributes of animals being presented in people in their subconscious reactions and then the way that I see them kind of living their life. And to the point that oftentimes in my own mind, in dealing with people, I kind of a lot of times will analyze what type of animal that I identify them with, and I'm not always obviously correct, but in a lot of ways, it doing so it helps me um, find ways to associate with, whether they're reacting in fear, whether they're acting in aggression, or or any number of reactions. If you understand the motivations behind it, oftentimes you can live in harmony with it if you can comprehend it. And so looking at those identifications of animals, it's helpful. So then considering that's one representation of what's brought upon the ark, was this idea that you're bringing all kinds onto the ark, so that number one, they can be preserved, and that their father, patriarch, is the thing that they're following onto the ark. That's an interesting thing to consider. I really appreciate that.
Well, and then what you can do, there's a couple threads of scripture, and I'm not going to pull it up because of time, but I'll quote it, that really start making sense a lot more. The first is Joseph Smith has the first vision, and he's praying, and Heavenly Father, this is just fascinating. Joseph Smith, the Lord doesn't introduce Heavenly Father. Heavenly Father introduces Joseph Smith to his son. And he says, Joseph, this is my beloved son, hear him. And then Christ talks to Joseph Smith. Well, what happens is that was when Joseph was 14 in 1820. 3 years later, Joseph is wrestling and with the Lord, or trying to receive a forgiveness of his sins. The Lord didn't come to Joseph, but the patriarch Nephi did. And the patriarch Nephi said, Joseph, you need to turn your hearts to the fathers to the children. If not so, the whole earth will be wasted at his coming. The concept there is that Joseph needed a mentor. He needed somebody to tutor him. And in the LDS tradition, they flower up Nephi's tutoring, and they say first it's Moroni, which is not true. It's patriarch Nephi. But then some of Joseph's tutoring is not actually, it's a little brash sometimes. There's a story, and I like the imagery. I think it probably is true. But Joseph gets tempted before, on a date that is not fall solstice, to go and up to the Hill Cumorah, and he gets shocked when he tries to touch the rock, and Patriarch Nephi comes and lectures him. And there's a couple instances that Joseph needed correction, and he needed some lecturing. But if you think about this in the context of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and they have a flock, and maybe their flock is full of lambs, but maybe their flock also has some cows and some deers and some leopards and some lions and a handful of others. Maybe there's a couple sparrows and a couple falcons and hawks and things like that. They're shepherds. They're bringing their church or their people into the ark as well to help take care of the creation. That's just a thought of looking at this maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, I like that.
The next thing is, so what we have here is we have a global flood that is starting creation over again. So what I want to do is the next imagery actually follows what I was talking about. So there's two things that um, uh, after the flood occurs, Noah's trying to find a beachhead, a resting place for his ark. So let's read chapters or paragraph 17, if that's okay. Do you mind doing that?
Can you pull it back up on the screen?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't transfer it. Okay.
And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot. And she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters had not receded from off the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her, and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days. And again he sent the dove out of the ark. And the dove came in to him in the evening, and in her mouth an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and sent forth a dove, which returned not again unto him any more.
Okay. So there's some really, really interesting imagery here. And I even have it. I'm going to bring up this slide just because I like the slide. So I added a new slide than what we had before. And this was the dove versus the church. I wanted to carry this thought a little bit further. So ravens are interesting birds. They are used in scripture every so often. Specifically, a raven, I believe, was used by the Lord to feed Elisha. He was at the well. It was during the dearth, and I believe it was ravens. It might have been crows, but
I think it is ravens.
But the raven fed Elisha. Now, everything has a type and a shadow. You can take something that is small, like Elisha and Israel, and turn it into something that is great or big or global, like Noah and the ark. So what's happening in Israel at the time that Elisha is getting fed by ravens?
There's a famine on the earth.
Yeah. There's no prophet in Israel. Everything has become corrupted. The whole thing. Now, what is the raven then? I want to make it. Oh, go for it.
Oh, to me, and there's a tradition which holds that the Lord had essentially given a promise to Cain when he curses him. And so one of the connections is the phraseology that's used there, went forth to and fro, connecting the raven with Cain. Because the obligation that the Lord had is that no one could slay Cain. Therefore, the Lord preserved Cain through the flood by giving him place on the ark. But immediately, as soon as it's done, notice he's booted off, and there's no more mention of the raven. It's like, it's interesting that the ravens sent, and whether the waters have abated or not, no one cares at that point about the raven. The dove, on the other hand, there is concern for that. Anyway, that's a tradition I read about a long time ago, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'd never considered that.
It's a very interesting point. Like, I've never thought of that either. That's a different way to look at it, which I find to be very interesting. I kind of like it. what I do know is the properties and the resume of a raven, because you can identify the raven and the properties of a raven from Elisha. Elisha did what he needed to do, and now he is getting fed by a raven and water. So it's something that the Lord specifically sends to you to feed you what you need to know or what you need to do the next thing. So the raven was a preparer, maybe. Maybe it was somebody who prepared the way for the next thing. There was a lecture by Denver Snuffer at my house 2 years ago. Well, no, about a year ago last summer. And there was a question asked on the Q&A about Hugh Nibley. And the question was Hugh Nibley a preparer? And Denver thought about it and said, yeah, I think he was. Because before Hugh Nibley came out with all of his books and really said, hey, wait a second. There's a bunch of Hebrew and a bunch of Egyptian in the Book of Mormon and in the Temple Endowment. And I remember I broke my, I served my mission in North Carolina. I broke my nose and tore my gums out in Chapel Hill. I was playing basketball. I was getting a little too excited, and I smashed my face against a gymnasium stage at a stake center. And my blood went all over the ground, and I had to go to the hospital. And I was out for a week. And in Chapel Hill, you have a theology school, and one of the members had a whole bunch of movies and every single book of Hugh Nibley. And I sat there and I looked and I watched a handful of Hugh Nibley movies. And there's a movie of Hugh Nibley in probably the 70s or 80s wandering around Egyptian temples. And he's pointing at the hieroglyphs and he says, guys, this is the LDS endowment. Right here, right? You can see it. You can see the whole thing. It's right here. Joseph couldn't have made that up. That was there way before him. But was Hugh Nibley a raven? That's another way to look at it too. I don't think that there's a wrong answer. The next is there's a dove. The dove goes out and he looks and he can't find a tree. My grammar is amazing. He can't find a tree. Doves are always related to somebody with a covenant. The sign of a son of God is a dove. And there are many sons of God. That's what the New Testament tells us. There are God's many and Lord's many. A dove is always a son of God. So when John the Baptist baptizes Christ, the sign of the dove is given. I'm sure that Joseph Smith had a sign of the dove, and Peter and Paul and Elisha and Elijah and Nephi and Lehi and Samuel. They all had signs of the dove. So he sends out a dove, a son of God. He can't find any place to rest his ark, or at least the imagery of the bird. Then he sends out another dove 7 days later, and that dove does find a tree to perch at to move his ark, which is where the ark needed to go. So those are some interesting things as you think about how this all could relate.
For sure.
Okay. So the next thing is he sends out the dove. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the vineyard of Noah, because the vineyard of Noah and the penalty of Ham are very similar. Or they're directly related. They're not similar, but they're related. So, and I'm sorry, I just brought up a slide to show that, and I didn't go to the slide. So let's just real quick, go to the side so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about the penalty of, or the vineyard of Noah. Do you see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And the penalty of Ham. Now, ham is really funny because ham or pigs are a unclean animal for Jews to today. So it's kind of a funny play on words that his name's Ham. I just find that to be funny. But anyway, it's unclean. The whole thing is unclean. So let's go to this. I'm going to go down. I'm going to actually find, because I think I lost my place. Okay. All right. Do you mind reading verse 23 and 24? Because
Sure.
I have a thought on this that might change a couple other thoughts. Okay.
And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the three sons of Noah. And of them was the whole earth overspread. And Noah began to till the earth. And he was a husbandman. And he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunk. And he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brethren outside. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid upon both their shoulders and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And a veil of darkness shall cover him, that he shall be known among all men. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years, and all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died.
God, so mean. What's going on here? We have about 15 minutes or so before we'll finish. I want to share a thought, but I'd love to hear what you think about this, Edwin. What do you think about the curse of Ham and this vineyard that Noah created, and why such imagery? Why did this happen?
So it's I know that there's a lot of levels here, okay, but one level that Jordan Peterson brought out that I absolutely loved was when children see the nakedness of their parents. Okay, now we're talking allegorically, so the errors of their ways. When a child sets to expose the errors of their parents, notice who receives the curse. It's their children. So Ham notices the error of his father, the nakedness of his father, and he exposes it to other people. But it's his son who pays the price. And so I've seen this fulfilled in my own life when people point to their parents and say, "Oh, my parents, they were so terrible because of this, and this, and worst parents ever because of this." Their children then are raised up with that attribute of looking, back with disdain towards their ancestors, and that then brings a curse upon those children. That is a veil of darkness. So I really love, because that point about the veil of darkness is not something that's included in the King James version, but clearly is something that Joseph Smith added in. So for me, that's the allegorical level of interpreting it, and I really love it because, like I said, I've seen that come to pass in my own life.
I think that's brilliant. I love what you just said. There's a law irrevocably decreed in heaven before the foundations of this world, upon which all blessings are predicated. And there is a law that says, honor your father and your mother. And then this is the only law in the Ten Commandments that has a promise that your days may be long upon the land. So if you start pointing fingers at Brigham Young and say he did this and this and this and this, and you say, guys, yeah, but he brought the saints to the Salt Lake Valley, and he set up an ensign to the nation, and he really built Deseret. Your days will be short upon the land if you start pointing out other people's flaws and failures. If you go to Joseph Smith and say, Joseph Smith did this and this and this and this and this, and you start criticizing and criticizing, the churches that come from it will be destroyed. And they're getting, one is already destroyed, another is getting destroyed. And what's fascinating about Joseph Smith, Edwin, is this. I don't believe that the Lord says anything in Scripture that is vain, that doesn't have greater meaning. And in Liberty Gel, he says, thou art not yet as Job, your friends do stand by you. Well, if the Lord is using an imagery of Job, the archetype of Job is somebody who loses his family of 10 and gets a new family of 10, a brand new family of 10. The churches of the Restoration are divorcing themselves from Joseph Smith because they look at his flaws, or what they perceive to be their flaws, which I don't believe were flaws. And I believe that if they lived at the time of Joseph, they would have been had a completely different understanding of what was going on. But they have divorced themselves from Joseph, and he is as Job, who is seeking a new family. But that idea that your days will be long upon the land if you honor your parents, really, like, it just makes practical sense, like Jordan Peterson says, as well as scriptural sense.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, one of the things, too, is Canaan goes into Noah's tent. The thing about going into somebody's house and getting mad at that somebody, and maybe not even being invited into their house. Maybe you walked right into their house and you accused them, or you did something. You have to say, well, you don't know what's going on, and this isn't your home, and you need to stop what you're doing. Ham went into Noah's tent. Noah wasn't in Ham's tent. He wasn't. And Noah wasn't in Shem's tent. And Noah wasn't in Canaan's tent. And Canaan wasn't in Noah's tent. They were in everybody else's tents. Now, the last imagery that I want to give goes to Joseph of Egypt. And I want to make a suggestion that there's something here. So do you remember the two people that came to Joseph in prison?
The baker and the butler.
Yep. Who gets the head cut off?
Let me think. The baker gets his head cut off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. There's an imagery here, Edwin, of a vineyard. Noah sets up a vineyard. A baker bakes bread. A shepherd takes care of sheep. A cattle rancher takes care of cows. Those are all very interesting images. So the person who gets his head cut off is the baker who's stealing. One of the things that Ham did is he went into Noah's tent, who built a vineyard of the Lord, and he uncovered things that he was trying to do. He was being a Ham. He was uncovering things that shouldn't be uncovered. So what happened is he was cursed. The baker lost his head because he was stealing bread of Pharaoh. What do you think the imagery of the bread and the vineyard would be?
The bread, I mean, you've got the sacrament there, right?
Yeah, bread of life, word of God. If I go and one of the things Denver Snuffer does is every one of his books, every one of his papers, every one of the things that he does has, a copyright. If I start going around and preaching what Denver Snuffer has done in the same way without citations, my wife got her master's degree in nurse education, and she's she's very strict on citations. You need to cite this. You need to cite this. You need to cite this. Or you need to cite, or this is the way that you cite something that has all the appropriate references. If you take somebody's bread and you make it your own, you're stealing from Pharaoh. You're stealing people's bread. And your head needs to get cut off. At least that's the imagery in Joseph of Egypt. If you go into somebody's tent and you unveil their wine, or you unveil their vineyard, or you take their grapes, that's another set of imagery related to why Ham was cursed. He was a baker in the prison of Joseph. Does that ring true to you? Or do you follow what I'm trying to say?
I was gonna say I don't fully follow it.
Okay, let me take a step back. So Joseph had two people in prison. One was a butler and one was a baker. A butler to Pharaoh was just a servant to Pharaoh. He was serving Pharaoh. He was released, and because he was serving Pharaoh, he was taking care of what needed to be done. The baker was baking bread, and what was his dream? Who pecked at him, his face, I guess? Who pecked the face of the baker? Was it ravens?
I can't remember if it was ravens or not. I can't remember ravens, crows, or if it was just birds. Do you know?
Yeah, the bird. I would have to go back. The birds pecked at his face. He was stealing bread. Ham went into Noah's tent, who built a vineyard, and uncovered what Noah was trying to do. Shem and Japheth veiled it so that he knew what he was trying to do, what he was doing, not trying, but what he was doing. I would make a suggestion that the actions of Ham are similar to the actions of the baker. They followed the same thing. One person was stealing bread. The other person was affecting a vineyard. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, you don't need to worry about it. But does that make sense?
So the baker was affecting the vineyard. You're saying by diluting the wine, or
no? So if you think about sacrament, one is wine and one is bread.
Yes.
So you have a baker who's baking bread, and you have a Noah who has a vineyard for wine. Yeah. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
But the outcome was the same. One got his face cut off or pecked off by birds. The other cursed, was unveiled. He was naked. He was unveiled. So you had two different people, two different things. One has a vineyard, one has bread, one has wine, one has bread. One gets his head cut off, or one loses his life, and one gets cursed. That is the wine and the bread. The bread, then, what is the bread of life?
It is Christ. It's the Word of God, right?
Exactly. So if I go and start quoting scripture without attributing it to the Lord and say, this is from Bryce Bartell, blah, 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 blah. I said this, I could get my face pecked off because that wasn't from me. That was from the Lord. I need to quote him. That was from him. That's his bread. If I start quoting things that Denver said that I hadn't received already or before he said it, but it was 100% Denver, then I could get my face pecked off like the baker. If I start unveiling a vineyard before it's ready and you're seeing somebody naked in a tent, you can get cursed because you're destroying what the Lord is trying to do.
Yeah.
So I would make an analogy that Noah's vineyard is similar to wine. The baker in Joseph's prison is similar to bread. Both of the bread and the wine had a consequence.
Yeah.
The consequence of the wine was a curse. A consequence of the bread was losing somebody's life.
That's interesting to consider, Bryce. That's pretty heavy. Because it compiles upon us then an obligation to say, well, we're going to then respect that like you said, what Denver's doing, and as you learn parts of what's happening, it's not wise for you to uncover it, to leave it covered, obviously, until his own ministry to go forth and do the things which the Lord has asked of him, and not to run forward with it as you see it. That's kind of the lesson you're saying, correct?
Yeah, you need to veil things when they're supposed to be veiled. People have issues with Joseph Smith's multiple counts of the first vision. In my opinion, there were actually two veils. One is the veil of the people. The people needed to be veiled who Joseph Smith actually was. And when they started casting him out, when they started rejecting him, when they threw him out of Kirtland, when they threw him out of Far West, when the Whitmers all left, Joseph then had to say, I've been playing gentle. I haven't been telling you who I am and what I'm doing. But now I'm playing hard. I was this is the Joseph. I was in the grove of trees, and the Father and the Son came to me. And this is what they told me to do. So you unveil a situation as people reject, and you say, this is actually what's happening. It's why Nephi didn't shock Laman and Lemuel in the valley of Lemuel. They had a Liahona. It's the reason why Laman and Lemuel didn't get shocked when they lost their slings and their bows. It happened exactly when it needed to happen. We're building a boat, and this is what we're doing, and this is where we're going. The veil of Joseph Smith's tent became unveiled when he gave the first vision account that he actually penned. The veil of Nephi and who Nephi was unveiled when he was building his boat.
Huh.
The bread that was different bread became unveiled when the bread needed to be unveiled. So, the bread came from unique sources. Nephi became a baker, but his bread was his own. He went and he got what his father got, and he got a different vision. He saw the literal meanings of everything versus the symbolic meanings of everything that his father saw. So Nephi started receiving his own bread. And his brothers were like, the Lord doesn't make these things known unto us. Well, get your own bread. Get your own bread. You don't have to get somebody else's bread. You can get your own bread, and your own bread's going to look different. It's going to taste different. It may be made of cornmeal. It may be made of wheat. It may be made of barley meal. I mean, it may be a whole different set of bread. But go get your own bread. You don't have to rely on somebody's bread. And if you start imitating somebody and don't reference that you're borrowing their light, you're getting a whole different set of bread. So this bread and wine thing is very fascinating as you look at the differences between Ham and the baker and Noah and Joseph.
That is so fascinating. I like that.
Well, I like you, Edwin. Thank you again for joining this. I was going to get to Melchizedek, but I think that's a different story. And I think that's probably a story on its own. So I'd love to finish here. Do you have any other thoughts before we finish?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, thank you, Edwin. And thanks, everybody, for joining this podcast. I appreciate it.